Hello and welcome to this week's video. So we're going to be using some items from the Dollar Tree to create ourselves our own Ghoulish Garden Evil Eye Wreath or Dragon Eye Wreath. So here are the supplies that you're going to need, as well as cardstock and hot glue. So if that sounds like a good plan to you, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. And this is going to be our centerpiece. But give this video a big thumbs up. Please consider subscribing, and let's get into it. Okay, so here are the supplies that we're gonna need. I bought 2 of each color, except for this orange and black one because I could only find one of them, which is fine. I only needed the one. And then you're also going to need black cardstock and hot glue. This wreath I did buy at Michael's. My Dollar Tree was completely sold out on Wreath. I did try a few different locations and I couldn't find it, so if you do have that happen, you can get them at Michael's. But we have 3 of the mesh wire ones, and then 4 of the really soft mesh. These ones don't have the wires or anything in them, so I did use all of this. So you will need to buy the same amount, and then you'll need some string, some fabric, scissors, and then of course our centerpiece, which is the eyeball. You can choose either this evil eye, or I think they just had like a giant googly eye that you could do as well. You're also going to need black cardstock paper and hot glue for the end of the video. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so these are about 6 inches wide, and we need to cut them into squares. So I got a ruler and we're going to cut it 6 inches long. So you should have a 6 by 6 square, just like this. And we're just going to do that with all of the mesh. Now it doesn't have to be exactly 6 by 6. You can just kind of guess. As you can see, I'm placing it here by the ruler, and then I'm cutting up. Now not all of them are going to be perfect, but it is going to be very, very close. So that's just what we want, as close to a square as you can possibly get without taking, a bunch of time measuring out exactly 6 by 6 squares, unless that's something that you want to do. Then you're more than welcome to. But I did that with all of the wire mesh, the brown and gold, as well as the orange, black, and gold ribbon. And then we're going to do the same thing with the soft mesh squares. I bought the spiderweb pattern and then another just sparkly kind of a pattern. But these are the same. They're 6 inches, so we need to cut them at 6 inches wide to make ourselves sort of a square shape. And these don't have to be exact, but just cut them out as close as you can possibly get them. And then these are going to be little inserts between the mesh to kind of fill in the space, because the mesh is actually extremely see-through. So I'm going to show you how we're going to fold these up. So you want this to be curl side up. And I watched a sunflower DIY wreath video, so if you want a closer look at how this folding works, you could definitely check those out. I'm using the same kind of method on mine. And then you're going to need your string, and we're going to wrap the string around the outside ring 2 times. Now I will explain in a little bit why this is important, but you need to double wrap it, otherwise it's not going to stay. So let's go back to our mesh. Rounded side ups, you're going to fold the opposite corners to each other in the center, and then you're going to scrunch it up together like that. And then if you just fold it, the scrunch comes undone. So you need to twist it together and then fold it up. And so you get a cute little bow looking shape like this. Now, in order to attach this, because it's not going to attach like that, we're going to need to create a little edge piece, or like a little nib or nub or whatever you want to call it. And that's going to be where we're going to tie the string around. Now my string got caught here, so I have to pull it out without unraveling my ribbon. But we're just going to attach it to the wires just by tying a simple double knot to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. And sometimes the string was kind of hard to work with, so make sure you give yourself a lot of extra room, and then just tie that as tight as you can. Okay, so with this extra string here, don't cut that off yet, we're going to use it. So you'll have that little guy hanging off there. And then we're going to take our mesh. I decided to go with the sparkly for the brown because I wanted the spider webs to go with the black and orange. But we're going to do the same thing, opposite corners together. We're going to scrunch it up and then make sure you twist it together to keep the scrunching. And then fold it up to form that little end piece, and then it creates a cute little bow for you. And then we're going to take that and place it directly on top of the hard mesh or the wired mesh. And we're going to use the extra string, and we're just going to go ahead and tie a knot around it just in place, just like that. I'm not super sure on how to explain this, but you're just going to tie it the best that you can on top of the mesh so that they layer. Now again, the sparkly mesh fabric is as a filler because the wire mesh is really see-through, so it just helps fill in that space so that your wreath isn't going to be see-through or looking really thin either. So yeah, it'll look just like that, and you're going to want to do that all the way around. Same thing. I'm going to go ahead and show this fold again. So it's going to be opposite ends folded together, and it creates kind of like an envelope looking shape. And then you're scrunch together the center, creates a weird little bow, and then fold it up together for a more squished together bow. And this creates our petals. So this is the outside edge of the flower, and we're going to be using the same technique for the entire wreath. It gives the volume and helps it look nice and full, and it's also the same technique that they use for the sunflower wreaths. That's where I got it from. So if you want a closer look at that, again, you just have to look for the sunflower wreath DIY videos, and you can find them on there. Okay, so to avoid repeating myself too much, we're just going to do this all the way around. Your fingers will start to hurt, at least mine did anyways, because I was tying them so tightly. I just didn't want them to go anywhere. If your string ends up being too small like this one, all you have to do is just cut another string and tie behind it. You can do just the one wrap around, but let me show you here. So this is when you wrap the string around twice, and this is once. So once it just kind of falls over, it's not secure, but if you wrap it around twice, it's secure, it stays in place, and it holds its shape. But if you just wrap it around once, then it just falls over and it's kind of limp. But if your string is too small and you need to tie the mesh on the front or the thin mesh on the top of the wired mesh, then you can do just one because it's not trying to keep to the wire by itself. It has the other mesh to hang on to. But we're just going to go ahead and, again, I think I said this a few times already, we're just going to repeat that all the way around until we feel like we have enough mesh on our wreath, which at this point it was kind of hard to tell. I was really questioning how much I needed, but it becomes more full as you get the center pieces in there. The outer edge one was kind of hard to tell, so I will show you a trick on how to add more to the outer edge at the end in case you don't add enough mesh and you want it to be a little bit thicker. But we're going to go ahead and do this all the way around. Okay, so this is after we finished that first row, and I did about 3 of them per wired section, and it really just depends on the size of your wreath, but for mine this was a really good place to start. So we're going to go ahead and get into the second row, which we're not going to do right underneath it. We're actually going to do the third layer down. So you could see the first one is where we attached it already, then the second one is kind of covered, and then this third one is where we're going to put the next row. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to wrap our string around twice to make sure that it's secure. And then I'm going to take my next color, which is going to be the black and the orange with the spider web meshing, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to fold it up and then just tie it. Same thing with the mesh right on top. And this is where the wreath really starts to build volume. It starts to look more full and more like your finished product. Now it's definitely something where you have to trust the process. I was questioning it 100% all the way through. And as well, don't forget to cut your strings off. This really bites me in the butt later on because I didn't cut all of them off, so I have to try and find them underneath the ribbon. So make sure that you're cutting all those extra string pieces off before you go to your next layer, and it just makes it a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and do that all the way around here. Again, if you need to look at these folds a little bit closer, I would just look up the DIY sunflower wreaths, the burlap ones, because that's where I got the idea from. But yeah, not much else to say here except for that it takes a really long time. It took me 4 hours in total to do this, but it wasn't like a 4 hours of just sitting there. Like, I got up and I walked around and I made food and stuff like that. So from beginning to end, maybe 3 hours if you took out all of my breaks, but it did take a really long time because you have to tie every single one of these in here individually. When I did this black and orange, it was about the same 3 per wire section. And then I was kind of measuring the eyeball here to see how far it would need to go. And we'll definitely have to do a filler on the center piece. But it's pretty easy. It's just tedious. It takes a really, really long time. It takes some patience, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. I thought the end result was super cool. So this here, I did that second layer, and then I did a third layer. You can see right there, that's the very last wire piece. So you should have ribbon tied to the edge. You should have ribbon tied to the third wire, and you should have ribbon tied to the last wire. Okay, sorry, my voice was cracking there for a minute. But what we're going to do after we have all our ribbons on here is we're going to cut off all those strings. And we're going to measure out how much space that we have left to fill before we can put the eyeball in. Now again, this is going to be different for everyone's wreath because it just depends on how much space you have in the center here. But I'm going to show you how to fill it up. So we're going to need that black cardstock paper, and we're going to just trace out where the wreath is at, where the opening of the wreath is at. And this gives us a really good idea of what size it needs to be. Now you can keep the square and just glue it straight onto the back, but I wanted to trim it in a little bit so it's not going to be as noticeable. And then we're going to cut and leave about 1 inch to 2 inches around the line that we made. So it's pretty much just cutting off these corners, and it gave me like an oval sort of a shape, just because we want to make sure we have plenty of space to glue this in here. If you cut it right on the line that you drew, it's not going to have any extra space to glue. It's just going to slide through the hole. So we're going to go ahead and put this on the back, and then we're going to glue it onto those little ribbon nubs. So those little guys that are sticking out that we tied, we're just going to go ahead and glue the paper to it, and this will hold it on. And then when we flip it back around, we'll make it a little bit more secure. But since it's something that just hangs on your door, you don't need to tie it in or anything. The hot glue will be strong enough, and the eyeball is not heavy at all, so it's not going to weigh it down too much. But we just go ahead and glue that all the way around here. Again, if you just want to use the full square, you can. But let's go ahead and flip that back around, and you see all these little extra ribbon edges that are sticking out, those little folds. I want to call them nubs, but I feel like someone's going to yell at me for doing that. But I just went ahead and glued those down to the paper, and I made sure every single one of them was glued down. This way it's secure, and we know that our ribbons are going to stay in place before we get started on the next step. You can see right here, this is where you lift it up, put some hot glue under there, and just press it down. And this also helps keep the paper in place too, so that it's less likely to fall off. You can use super glue if you want. I'm not a huge super glue fan because I always get it everywhere, so hot glue is just a better alternative for me. But we're going to take more of that mesh. It should be your last 2 rolls. And we're going to guess a 6x6 square. If you want to measure these out again, you're definitely more than welcome to. But at this point in my project, I had already spent several hours on it, so I just kind of wanted it to get done. So I cut it off into guesswork. But you can tell some of my pieces were too long, and I ended up having to cut those in half. Like this piece here, this piece was too long, so I cut it in half just as long as you have a squarish looking shape so that we can make those same folds. And you're going to fold it the exact same way as we did with the mesh, or at least the exact same way that we have been folding. And then I noticed on the spiderweb wreath there is a right side and a wrong side, so make sure that you're doing the folds with the right side out. And then we're just going to go ahead and hot glue this in, and we're going to press it down flat, and it actually creates a very clean line around the edge of it, and it covers up all of this extra ribbon and string that's hanging out here. So all of those little nubby guys is going to be covering them up, and it's going to be covering up those strings. And then it also covers up the extra space for the eye. I personally really liked it, and the soft mesh is the one to go with. If you tried to do this with the wire mesh on the inside here, I don't think it would stick as well, and it wouldn't cover nearly as much as you would need it to, because the wire mesh again is just super see-through, and yeah, it just wouldn't it just wouldn't cover as much. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that all the way around here, and then once you've done this part, you can measure out the eye again and see if it filled in enough. But I actually needed to do another mesh layer here, and so that's when I used the second, or my last, sparkle mesh roll. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing with it. We cut it into the squares, and then we're going to fold them up and glue them into here. I noticed as I was putting this in here that this black glittery mesh actually had some purple glitter pieces on it, which was really nice. I didn't notice that until this last minute. It's not terribly noticeable, it's just one of those little accent things, but yeah. And we're just gonna go ahead and glue that all the way around in circles. Round and round we go, like this entire wreath. We had to go round and round in circles for 4 hours. Yeah. But at this point I really like the way that it was looking. And you can see here on the edges, it needed a little bit more in the back because it was really full in the center, but it wasn't as full around the edges. So we're going to add some more mesh to it. I had an extra of this brown mesh because I only used one roll for the first layer. So we're going to use that second roll, and we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to tie it onto the back instead of tying it onto the front like the others. Now you can be proactive about this and add in these extra pieces when you're doing the front, and then just do the glitter piece for every other one or every two or something like that, because I didn't have enough of the glitter mesh to go with these. But I found that it was actually pretty okay because the regular mesh just add that extra fullness to it, and it didn't need the thin mesh to cover anything up, because that's pretty much all that thin mesh is for. Just added detail and to cover up some of the wire mesh stuff that you could see through, if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm explaining that really poorly. But yeah, you're just going to tie it onto the back. Now you can cover this up with more paper by gluing around the edges. I'm just going to leave mine out. I don't see a problem with it, especially if it's just hanging on my door. But yeah, and that's how you add more thickness to it. So if you want to add more than that, you're more than welcome to. But I felt at this point that I really liked where the wreath was at, and I really liked the way that it looked. And then we're ready to glue in the eyeball, which is the last step, which is the most exciting step. Now the pack does come with two, so just pick your favorite one. Both of mine were kind of smashed and broken, probably my fault, but go ahead and glue that in here. You have to be really quick about this part because the hot glue dries really fast, and do not press on the center piece, otherwise the plastic will collapse and your eyeball will look kind of silly. So there you go. There you have it, your Ghoulish Garden dragon eyeball flower. I think it looks amazing. I absolutely love this. This was a really good DIY and 100% worth every single second that it took. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, keep on spooking, all you ghouls and spookaneirs. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing because I would love to see you hanging around. Bye.